Greetings, everybody. Welcome to Simon on the Sofa. I'm Simon. I'm sat on that little sofa there. And as you see, if you're new to my videos, these conversations, these authentic, transparent conversations, then you can also visit my Patreon page now. And if you love what I'm doing and you're benefiting from the content that I'm sharing, then maybe you also want to get some more gifts by becoming a patron and support this mission to continue. And today, moving on, lovely, I am with a wonderful woman who has already had a conversation with me on her project, which is very similar to what Simon on the Sofa is all about. We have a very, I would say, common interest, a common purpose. And Tash Mitch is doing what you would call the Art of Life project, which is basically a project, or in my understanding from being on it, just a project to really inquire what it means to really live a life of art. How do we become the alchemists, the artists, the painters, to really step out of maybe our scarcity and our density and come into this flowering? But I haven't heard Tash say that, so she's going to introduce herself. But that's how I love to see this powerful woman. I've listened to a couple of her talks. I love her groundedness, her presence. And yeah, we just connected when we first met, and we had some fun. And this is our second time coming together in the virtual like this. So welcome, Tash.
Thank you. I love the poetry around what you just said of the art of life. It's so true, and you've summed it up really well. So thank you.
Wonderful, and welcome today to Simon on the Sofa. It's lovely to invite you here. I do, for the viewers, I do normally sit on the sofa. I'm bound by internet today, and there is a sofa in the background, so bear with me. I might jump over there at any spontaneous moment, so don't be scared if that happens. So Tash, I always, you know how we roll. I mean, I'd love to check in with you from a place of, you've been out there doing some beautiful work. You've been doing some speeches. You've been doing some energy work. You've been, you've been out there as I would say, a messenger. And we just had a lovely 10-minute conversation or more. I mean, as soon as we start talking, we're just off, and we have loads to share. And some really richness come up in that we didn't capture. But I don't want us to necessarily just go back to that. I'd love to for you to just check in. I mean, what's happening for you right now in the world? Where are you at? What's flowing through your cells, your divine? What are you alchemically sharing?
For me, the biggest thing at the moment is to actually honor the voice within, which is one of the reasons why I actually love your transparency work so much, because the power that we all have within us, is by honoring that voice within us, that sort of truth within us, that kind of wise whispering voice that sort of leads the way forward and kind of opens things up. And it isn't always the most comfortable thing to follow, but it actually has something just beautiful when we're able to follow that voice. And that's basically where I'm at the moment. The last year has been very much about kind of really honing in and listening to that voice and allowing that to lead me to the places of where I could be the most use, to the places where I could let divinity shine and feel the divinity shining back from wherever it is. So that's where I'm at the moment.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. So and just I'm loving dissecting at the moment. I'm in a bit of I'm really, I said to you at the beginning, I'm really checking in with myself, how impeccable I am to my word, and where I've dropped short, and what does things mean. I'm meeting a lot of people at the moment, Tash, yeah, and I'm sure you have too, where they're confused and they're in between stories, and also people are saying we're in a time now where everything's right and everything's wrong, and we don't want to judge, but then judgment's being misunderstood, spirituality is being misunderstood, and even when you talk about the inner voice, which I love, and I often say, look, we can connect to our inner guidance system, but maybe for the viewers, it'd be good for me and you to really break down the inner voice a little bit more, or that really trusting in yourself. And then you use the word divine, divine reflection, and that's something I love in you when I see you, and I feel that maybe yours and mine's perspective of divine reflection or connecting to the divine is very similar. But I've also had this conversation recently, Tash, and people get, they're so, and this is not a put down on anybody, but they're also confused, like divine. What does divine mean? I'm not divine. You know, what's divine? Is that religious? You're just being religious, you know? And so should we dive into the inner voice a little bit, if you're happy to?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, the thing with divinity and the inner voice and all of that kind of stuff is really about putting the work into getting to know yourself. Because I think basically we're all born not really knowing what we're doing here on this planet. You know what I mean? It's kind of like we're born into a body that we've not made really, so we don't know what it entails. We're born into a consciousness, and we've got access to a consciousness that we have no idea how it works. So it's almost like somebody handing you a package and saying, right, you need to play as much as possible to discover all these little bits of what this package does. And that's where life is for me. It's kind of like exploration, you know? To hear the inner voice, you know, there's a lot of people that when you say inner voice, they're really confused about what that is. And when you say tap into that inner voice, there's a look of kind of like vague, sort of like, I don't know what that means, you know? Right. Kind of like, I have no idea what that means. And also the lack of trust of the inner voice, because ultimately you know, there are times when people haven't actually had the opportunity to really explore, you know, their own intuition, to explore their own consciousness, and to explore how that operates in the world. And so it's still very kind of hazy as a concept. And then we're starting from kind of like ground zero then, do you know what I mean? Yes. Sort of like grounding aspect of that, basically.
Yeah, that, and I like that, the way that I like the refreshingness, or the freshness in the way that you're describing, because it is like, often I find that people don't want to admit that they don't know, right? It's so okay to say, hey, I love how you said, it's like we've been given a load of tools, we've been given a load of like experiences, consciousness is there, you know, different people giving their opinions and describing different things of how life can be lived and how it may benefit you or don't. But also people don't know. It's like, you know, there is this sense of really, we are making up. We have the ability, or some of us in this privileged state have the ability to go, wow, the concept of that I'm the artist of my life, that I'm the creator, that I could actually, I'm having some influence on the way that I'm living. Because most people I'm meeting, Tash, not everybody, but a lot of the people, I'm saying, you know, you realize that, you know, you're actually having a choice on how your life going. No, I'm not in control. I'm not the one. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't control it. I wouldn't do this. I'm just reacting.
It's a co-creative process. That's the ultimate thing, because we are co-creating with life, and so there is an element where we don't have full control because we didn't make this world in you know, the way that it is. And so, but there is an element of whatever is in the world is within us as well. So there is that opening for a co-creation to happen, and for that element of going, show me, do you know what I mean? What is this? What is there? Show me. But you know, that point that you make where we're so afraid to say we don't know, ultimately none of us have a clue. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. None of us have a clue, and we're discovering, we're getting a clue as we go along. And for me, it's just about having that kind of like almost childlike openness to say, I really have not got any idea what's going on at the moment. Show me. And there's something that happens in that moment of surrender where life actually starts to unfold for you. You start to see things. You start to see the clarity of where it is that you're supposed to go next, or what your place is, or what you're doing there. Right. But it's only in that moment where you say, actually, I haven't got a clue, you know, what's going on, because I haven't got a clue, that the opening exists, basically.
That's lovely. And that, go on. No, go on. I'll let you, you're pondering. Something was pondering. Carry on.
But it's the exploration, you know, it's the openness. And that's one of the, just going back briefly to the Art of Life project, that's one of the things that I'm really sort of honed in and passionate about, is how do we explore, you know, how do we explore what life is? Because to a large extent, we are told that as adults, we should have the answers and we should know. And so what having the answer looks like to a lot of people is just basically doing the same thing repetitively until you know it backwards and forwards and inside and out, and then you just stay on that track. You don't move left or right, you just stay right there. And in that gives you an element of feeling like you're in control, because in this track you know what happens, but there's all of the infinity of the rest of it that you're not exploring, and we lie in the infinity. So ultimately, you know, the adult mind, and this is where the exploration is, taking the adult mind from this track to the child mind of the exploration and opening it back out again, you know?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, let's just sit with that for a minute, because that is, yeah, you know, it's almost like we've been all going down this track that you describe, which is lovely. And we found, you know, we existed and we coexisted, and things happened and we built things, and that was all good. That's awesome. And, you know, that's created what it's created. And then now, as you say, there's that opening, and we are all in that unknown opening where we really have to let go of this needing to know and fall into the innocence of being, right? Yeah. It's like, that feels so beautiful, because then it's like, yeah, I love how you describe, like, yeah, there are things that we know. And okay, if I keep doing that posture, and we call that yoga, or I keep, you know, running like this and we call that running, then, you know, okay, great. Then we, you know, that's running. Okay, we're all fixed on that. That's running for now, right? But I'm also always loving this. I'm loving this uncertainty and curious stage of where it's all collapsing and falling apart, and I'm not feeling so rigid and stuck to, like, what is that? Is that what this planet is? Is that all it's showing me? It's like, you know, now I'm like, wow, this whole thing is this is all open. This is a trip. This is magnificent.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, basically, we live in a dichotomy, don't we? So we live in an existence where we have the mundane and the humanity of who we are, and that could feel like we know what that is. You know, we've lived in this body for however long we've lived in this body. We start to take that for granted, and we think we know what that entails. But then there's the sacred and the universal and the divine. It's a part of us that we actually have no idea about. For example, one of the things I say to people is there are 724 trillion cells in a human body, 724 trillion, right? Each one of those cells is a unit of consciousness. Each one of those cells is alive. You didn't make that. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like with your logical human mind that wants to control everything and wants to feel like they know everything. You didn't make any of that, you know? That was beside that human element of you. That was a universal, that was the divine element of you. And it's really then recognizing the sacredness of that, you know? That is something that is needing to be explored. It's not something that you know. It's not something that you would ever know in its entirety. But it's something that once you start to open and explore it, it shows you so much about your own self. If that makes any sense whatsoever.
No, it does. It does make sense, and I'm really feeling into it from a place of, because, you know, normally I use the term 60 trillion cells, because, you know, there's everyone saying different, right? And you've just blown me up. You've blown me out of the water and gone 720 trillion, right? Yeah. So I'm always blown away by how the more we explore the body, and the more that we even have the opportunity to explore that, because if we look at, I don't always use this terminology, but if we look at, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, then we know that, you know, you and I, for whatever reason, have, you know, blessedly been privileged enough to be able to contemplate our existence, to be able to contemplate cellular structure, to be able to contemplate, you know, this universe, and to be able to hang out on a normal day and just talk about life and love. I mean, you know, what a beautiful gift, right? That I want to say that, you know, that's something that I don't take for granted, and I'm very, very grateful for. So there's a lot, you know, there's a lot of humans that are experiencing life, if you want to call them humans. Sometimes I just call us pulsating atoms, but, you know, it's like, let's call us humans for now, that are experiencing life. It's in such diversity, in so many different ways. And like you described, there's so much happening all at once to even try to comprehend it with the mind. And it almost detaches us from just experiencing it through feeling, right? So I'm sort of, I've been moving into, you know, how to just feel it all, you know, rather than, like you said something lovely before we pressed record, which is, you know, not just judging and condemning and saying that's not right, this is right, and we've got to fix everything and help everything, but actually just looking into yourself, feeling into yourself. And maybe this brings us a little bit back to, you know, connecting to that inner voice. What's happening for you inside of you? I don't know if I'm digressing, but does that make you, is that what's coming up for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a narrowing down process. It's a process that, you know, you need to actually get still within yourself with an element of curiosity and open up to how you're feeling and the truth of that. And it's one of the reasons why I think, you know, the whole sort of coaching industry at the moment has kind of blown up in the way that it has, because people are more and more starting to recognize that exploration to a large extent can happen so much on your own, but if you're not careful, you end up going around in a loop, you know, because your mind in its boxed in state can only open itself so much. And sometimes you need outer sort of impetus in order to kind of like question you, to shine a light from a different perspective, to show things and to open things out for you, that you start to think, actually, I never really looked at it that way, or actually, you know, that's a point. Or just being able to voice what's going on with a witness allows you then to kind of, there's something that happens in that dynamic that opens things up for you, because you're speaking to an awareness, and you're constantly aware of that awareness that you're speaking to. So there's something that informs that information, you know. But I think as adults, that's a very necessary part of really finding what your true voice is exploring it, and exploring it in as many ways as you can, you know. And that could look like, for example, you know, sitting in front of someone and exploring the conscious mind, and then being taken into the metaphors of the subconscious mind. And also, you know, the things of what do we need to let go of in order to really hear that truth within us, you know? Because ultimately, there are times when there's things that's blocking that, or there's things that, you know, there's so much that happens, so many decisions that we've made from childhood, for example, where, you know, our 7-year-old self might have made a decision in the playground that kind of like was a definitive point of what life is about. Do you know what I mean? It's like, this is my place, and that's what the world is. And that could be anything, you know. That could be an opening where that person thinks, yeah, you know, I've got something to say here, and that something to say here travels all the way through their life. Or it could be, I've got nothing to say. I'm nobody really ever sees me. I'm not important. I'm not recognized, and that follows them throughout their life, you know, and that informs all their decisions going forward. And so finding a way to explore that opens all these elements of yourself up then allows that sort of hearing of the inner voice to happen so much clearer.
Yeah. That's really nice. And what's springing to mind as you're saying that is, you know, I love that metaphor, is that, you know, it's an agreement. You know, the word I'm using now, since also reading and exploring a bit more of Don Miguel Ruiz's work around the 4 agreements, is very much this, that I used to call it just conditioning. And often people go, well, conditioning, what does conditioning mean? And then if you just go to that, you know, this is just beliefs patterns that we've agreed to, that we've said yes to. And,
Yes.
you know, and the more that we go and look into this inner voice, this internal dialogue that's driving us, which you've described very, very clearly there for people to listen to, is that, you know, they often stem from our wounds. So what I realized going more and more on this inquiry, personal transformation, this self-inquiry, is that as an individual, as we go more into ourselves and we get to look more at our own experience, and we look back and we do either reflective writing, or we do meditation, or we do whatever the practice is that takes us into that space, we can start to really look at our wounds. And it's from these wounds that I'm starting to realize it more and more. I mean, I've read about it, and obviously I've transmuted my wounds into something beautiful. So I know it happens, but the more I work with individuals and groups, I'm seeing that, wow, this wound that everyone's running away from and avoiding is a massive, and I think you would call it, I mean, this is what energy transmutation is, right? Energy alchemist. This is a massive transmutation and opening for creation, for art, if you will, for beauty to come through. And I think that regardless of whatever else is going on in the world, if you and I, because we're on this very same path, if we just, and people watching and joining us today, if this is where you are and you're listening to me and Tash today, and any of the stuff we're saying is just resonating with your own common sense of some kind, it's like sparking something in you that goes, wow, yeah, then, you know, there's that invitation to another aspect or another pathway that this universe is offering. And I tell you now, based on the many pathways that I've explored, this one is opening up to something so vastly magnificent. And I mean, you know, sometimes I want everyone to be on it, but not from a selfish, like everyone's got to change. But wow, what we've created, and then the potential of this opening through our wounds is, I can't even imagine what the world looks like. But I'm just, you know, as I'm speaking, I'm contemplating that, Tash. I don't know what's coming up for you, but I'm just like, wow.
Yeah, it's really interesting, you know, because I actually went back to that kind of like that childhood thing where, you know, parents and it's something that kind of came forward when you were speaking, like parents are very much, I'm the parent and you're the child. And that whole element of children should be seen and not heard, and all of what gets created out of because as a child, we're so open to what life has to offer. We're so open to discover because we know we don't know. We know we haven't got a clue, and everybody's telling us we don't have a clue. So we're like in the middle, like, I just want to see what goes on, like, show me, you know? And in that time of phrase of our life, we're sort of taking in so much, and we're kind of like building the foundations of what we think life means. And when you talk about wounds, that's a lot of where a lot of our wounds come from, is basically, you know, from the dynamic of parents, or the dynamic in school, or the way teachers saw us. So, you know, that kind of thing. And when you talked about the wounds dropping away, I was seeing that if it started from that element where parents, for example, recognized how important it is for them to open themselves up to what they have available within themselves, and to open their minds up to the beauty of their own consciousnness. And they were actually able to help their children to see the beauty of what they have within themselves, and to open, that creates, you know, that creates a world where we're all walking in our empowerment. You know, we're all standing tall as human beings in our empowerment, because we know that there's a connection, you know, to our divinity within us. And we're a long way away from that now, you know.
Yeah. Easy. I'm not sure.
We're a long way away from that. It's kind of like, when I see that picture, I see us doing this as a humanity, you know, as a human race. And then being no exception, like basically as a human race, us moving forward with this level of empowerment within us. And it's happening, you know, the opening is happening at the moment, and that's a beautiful thing. And
it has to, doesn't it? Sorry to just jump in there, because I love it. You know, I know you've heard this as well, I'm sure, but you know, like there's that thing around at the moment in, I don't like to call this spiritual stuff or whatever, just the, you know, the collective, like when everyone's like, it's happening, right? And it's like, it's certain things people have been saying some things are happening, right? Since 2012, it's happening. The shift is happening. And I'm always, and what you're saying is, what you're saying and what they're saying, I'm laughing about it, but it is, there's a beautiful way of looking at all of this. And this is what really supports me, is that when we detach, like you just said, and I want to just actually, before I jump into this evolution bit, I want to just say about what you said about parenting. I don't want to bypass that, because there's such a beautiful point that you bring up there around even this idea of conscious parenting and not condemning or trying to box in these beautiful, divine, let's call them divine sacred beings that have come into the world and look up to us as like you just said, pointers to show them, right? And as you were speaking, I felt that innocent curiosity in me, and within that, I also felt where I've been blocking that with my need to know, or my need to be seen from others that I know and that I'm wise in some way, right?
Yeah.
And rather than just going, yeah, okay, I know a few things, but hey, I'm here. Even if the same person teaches me the same, I don't know, the same move that I've been doing for 10 years, show me again. It's like you might tweak it this time in the way that I've never tweaked it. It's like, you know, when you're with a child does the same thing 20, 30 times, and it's like, hey, look, car goes down, and you're like, man, car goes down. And we just did car goes down for like 30 minutes. It's like, but if you can be there, I try to be there with children and go, yes, car goes down. It's like, where does car go this time? And they're like, car goes down and then flies, and you're like, wow, yes. On the 30th time, car goes down and flies. Wow. Right? And you know, Tash, what comes up for me is recently around Christmas, I'm very much bar humbug Christmas, right? I'm like, forget that old story. It's outdated story. It's not got anything for me in terms of other than a commercial date when we should be generous, etc., right? However, one thing it does hold is the ability to connect and come together with like-minded, well, our family and like-minded people and celebrate something, hopefully life and connection, and not just some figure that we've created with a beard, right? And then the other thing that comes up for me around Christmas is that I don't want to ever take away an individual's imagination. I would not be the person that says, hey, don't imagine. But it's the context in which we're creating these imaginary characters and so on. So what you described when you said, hey, from a parenting perspective, if we can like give this space for sovereignty, for, divine connection, for the wonder and the innocence and curiosity of who we are, the mystery of who we are. Can you see that when we live in that mystery, all of life becomes that wondrous imagination, that mysterious playground of creation. Wow.
Absolutely. And this is a consciousness of it, right? Because I think one of the things with Christmas, I mean, you sort of saying about the bar humbug thing, but I think it's really good for us to have rituals. And I think it's really good to have rituals that recognize something.
Yes.
But it's kind of like, what are you recognizing? And a lot of people sort of like get swept away with the whole Christmas thing without actually really putting conscious mind as to, well, what are we doing here? Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like going up and buying a whole load of presents, but really, what are you doing? And is there consciousness behind that? Because ultimately a lot of times there isn't. It's kind of like, I have known of people to have a certain figure in their mind of what they want to spend on someone's Christmas present, and then they just go out and they try and find this thing and make up that money, but no thought of behind like the person that they're connecting to. Is this, so it's about that. It's a ritual about it. It's kind of like really consciously connecting to it. Right. And that whole conscious parenting is that level of connection. It's that level of really being in the moment and connecting to what you're actually doing in that moment. Do you know what I mean?
What's actually arising that's not of your control or desire to bring to it, you know, like, okay, I'm here and I have to do X, Y, and Z because that's what either parents do or where, because I see that happen so much, Tash, as well. Pull me back if I digress here, because I know you didn't finish fully and I want you to, but I'm just going to throw this in for you, is that I notice when parents, and you know, whatever, this is just what I observe, they're going through the motions of what they think a parent should be.
Yeah. But and that's, you know, ultimately I think I've got a lot of empathy, because, you know, we don't have the same energy every day. Every day is not the same day. And so some days you show up and you're like quite amazed at how fantastic you were that day. And other days you show up and you're like, damn. You know, and it's actually to be honest and open and truthful with yourself in that as well. But for me, it's bringing the sacred in, and it's always inviting the sacred in, and it's inviting that kind of element where we actually have a level of appreciation, a level of gratitude, a level of opening to magic, and a level of opening to the unknown, and always inviting that in. And once we do that, it informs consciousness in a different way. It doesn't inform consciousness in that kind of rigid sort of like trapped way of doing the same thing we know all the time. It invites for something else to happen, you know, it invites for, you know, the unknown to inform a moment that you're like, wow, I mean, I just never thought that could have happened. I never thought that moment could have happened, and here we are, you know?
Yeah.
It's allowing and surrendering for that to happen, basically.
Yeah, and you know what's popping up for me? I'm even feeling in that, just in as we breathe into that and feel the transmission that's being called in from having these dialogues, you know, from having the space to have this.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, like, in this moment, if I invite you to, like, if we in this conversation now, I know we did a little bit at the beginning, but for the viewers and for the beautiful people that are sharing the time with us, if we called in the sacred now, what would that sound and feel like from your perspective to begin with?
I'm going to take a pause, and I'm also going to actually plug my computer in, because I've just noticed that.
Yes, okay, plug in. And also, my computer went freaky as well. I don't know what happened. Like, I've had no controls here, by the way. I don't even know how we can end this call, so we might have to talk for the whole day.
I think there's a natural opening and a natural ending, I think.
Always.
Yeah, there is definitely. Always. But what would it look like if we were to call the divine in? One of the things is to actually bring the attention to what it is to connect to divinity, and also to bring the attention to us as humans and the totality of what that means. And for me, one of the things that I tend to do with people is to have them connect to the floor and connect to the ground and connect to that earthy rootedness of themselves as a human, and what it feels like to be in the body, and what it feels like to actually be present and be here and be now. And really getting a sense of the body and getting a sense of it being in the here and now, and making that really solid connection, and just bringing a level of gratitude to the fact that you have this tool that allows you to experience life and allows you to interact with the world around you. Sometimes we take that tool so much for granted. Sometimes we take the body so much for granted. But the body is doing so much, and it's just bringing the appreciation to that. And then when we are inviting the divine in, we're inviting that element of the universal, that element of ourselves. And I say this to people, you know, if we take the soul, and if you don't have a belief of the soul, or, you know, spirituality isn't big and on your radar, and there's no concept of what a soul is, let's just take it as a metaphor. And let's take it as you having a part of you that has existed since the beginning of time and space and is able to inform you here and now, has access to information that goes far beyond your 3D world, you know? And the way that I would actually put it, the difference between our human self and our divine self is, for example, if you imagine yourself being in a room, a small room, with one little window, and you're looking out at the world through this one window. And everything that you see outside through this window is your entire world. And that really is what it means to look at the world through a very human perspective, to look at the world through the mind of the 3D, basically. And then if you were to take your universal self is basically you at the edge of the universe, looking down on creation and looking down on all the planets that exist in the universe, looking down at Earth as a speck, and looking down at yourself as actually probably a non-entity, but something that is major in that world that you're in, but on the size of the universe is a tiny, tiny, tiny speck. And if you look at yourself from the edge of the universe, you see what it is to look from divinity. You see what it is to look from your divine self. And I think to a large extent, we're always playing between these two worlds. We're playing between the world of that small window in a small room and the world of that universal self, really. And inviting divinity in is really about inviting that universal self to inform us in this moment and to inform us of where it is that we need to go from a bigger perspective, from a higher perspective, from a more knowing perspective.
Yes. Yeah. So while you're, thank you firstly, just for dropping into that, because, you know, when I put my feet on the ground, and we did this at the beginning, I know a tiny bit, but I put my feet on the ground and I breathe and I just listen to you, just listen. And I get all these visions popping through, and I'm just trying to come back to my breath and just listen to you and listen to your voice and how it's meandering and pointing and giving me those visuals. And I just feel that, I love that, because it brings me into this, it brought me into this innate knowing of this higher intelligence. And when I say higher intelligence, I'm not pointing to, for people viewing, just, you know, some man with a beard up in the sky that's, you know, controlling all of this like puppets. But like Tash described at the beginning, where, you know, the heart is beating, the body is here, you came out through that, you know, what we believe to be the sperm cell that grew, and one of them out of 200,000 made it through, and then you grew and you grew and you grew and you grew, and you've grown into what you are now, listening to me and Tash here, and then taking Tash's perspective of just diving into that gratitude, which brought me into the present moment, which then in this space opened up a vastness of what I already am, without what it seems to be. And this is not creating separation in any way, because the whole spectacle of life is phenomenal. But then we can be of that whole spectacle from that observer, innate knowing, as Tash also described, that knowing of that, wow, I am a part of this vastness. And when we connect into that big universal mind, that more abundantly open, liberated perspective, our little stories of confinement and competitiveness and violence and pain body and anger and resentment and bitchiness and dramas and all this other, like, just real on a level, you know, it's there and it's alive for people and it's big for people, but you know, it's pointless. Yeah, it's just like, I'm saying that from my dream perspective. Okay, but within that, I don't want to take away that it's clearly not pointless, because the majority of our human beings are among that, and I'm not excluding myself from being in my pain body at times still now, and so on. So again, we want to look at that with universal eyes, and then see what potentially happens without condemning it. But again, I think that comes back to, Tash, from that gratitude and that beautiful connection comes expansion. Because then all of a sudden, what I feel as we're talking from this place is a dissolving of that, like, and just witnessing it for what it is, but it actually not having any real grasp or control over me, or and the opening for anybody maybe listening to this. It is not who you are. It's a part of you.
Yes.
It's not, it's just not who you are. That's what come up for me.
Absolutely. And one of the things that sort of came up, a vision that came up when you were speaking just then, is also to understand, and it's one of the things that I always bring people's minds to, is the fact that we all have a purpose of being. We all have a reason why we came to this planet, a reason why we actually incarnated. That when we tap into the universal element of self, we're able to see that each person plays a part. Each person is linked and plays a part in and has a divine part to play in this, in humanity, basically.
No matter what they're doing.
And ultimately, it's really about finding that and honoring that as well. So when you're kind of like looking from that universal self and looking down onto that kind of speck that you are on planet Earth, that little speck, even though it's kind of like part of so much, has its part to play, has its role to play, has its connection that opens things up, that is yours and yours alone. And that's one of the things that I always bring people to, is the fact that, once you actually start to connect into, you have a purpose, you have a reason for being here. There's a reason why you chose to be in this time and this space right now. Let's try and connect to that. Let's open ourselves up to that. And amazing things happen from that as well, because we're able to connect to that universal self that we were talking about previously, that divine self, that inner voice. When we have that invitation of, show me what my purpose is, show me what I'm here to do, the connection that we have to that inner voice becomes clearer. It informs us and it opens things up for us in ways that I don't think would happen without that questioning.
Yeah. So that's like, I don't know if my computer's crashed. Am I there? Yeah, you can see me.
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
We might have blown up the whole mainframe here, which is awesome. I suppose for me it's funny because I love it. I love these conversations so much, and then within that, I know that they mean nothing and they mean everything.
Yeah.
And, I know that you and I can laugh at that because we're exploring curiously into what life is, what it means to be an alchemist of life, what it means to be an artist of creation, what that means. And I think that, like you just said, to have these questions, to have this inquiry, I mean, there is an opening, there is a transmission, there's a liberation in that. It's like when you come together, and you said it earlier, and you get the opportunity to share and be with somebody, and for them just to hear you and connect with you. Like when I do sharing circles and I do sharings with myself, I mean, this is pretty much a sharing, but we would dive into how we're really feeling in the body and just share what's happening for us. There's something really unifying in that with whoever else is in the space. Yeah. There's something that takes us beyond the sort of single self, I'm alone here doing everything myself, and we sort of connect into that really connected, bonded, and I'm going to use the word healing. It's like into that healing space where and you said this recently on a little talk that you did, where it's not about I'm the healer and I'm creating this healing space. It's about we come together, and through us just showing up and being real and being authentic and being transparent and revealing ourselves in whatever that looks and feels like in the moment, that in itself creates this beautiful healing vibration, this field of well, really, I'm going to use the word transcendence, because it actually does transcend you out of the limited self, the limited thinking of scarcity and dense frequency.
It's interesting because absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why I find this particular way and format, so the Simon of the sofa, on the sofa, that way of, you know, bringing someone together with yourself and just opening time and space to see what happens in the midst of that, is really interesting. Slightly disconcerting at times, because you're a bit like, oh my God, where's this going? And the mind wants to know, you know. But
yes.
Then on the other side of the coin, even in that, because there's always a part of me that's witnessing. So there's a part of me that witnesses myself having responses to things, you know. And so, yeah, it's interesting, like, this conversation has been quite fascinating for me in the one hand, because it unfolds so many things, and there's so many things that have come out in this time and this space, just in this interaction. And there's also that, like I say, that witnessing element of it, where it's like, wow, you know.
Yeah, and actually, but I know I can even feel it, and like you said, you can always feel, and you do conversation yourself, you can feel it's coming round, right? Yeah. But within that, I'd love you, because I really get from you that you want to be, you are open and you are transparent, and you want to live from that place of integrity and truth and so on. And when you speak, I know you're very empathic, and you really consider where the individual are, and even I know that from conversations I've had with you, and then you've managed to bring them out. So I'd love you just to share, with that observer perspective, I'd just love you to share a little bit of what was, you know, for the viewers, like what was challenging, like, because I'm the same. I watch myself and I listen to myself sometimes, and I go, oh, I've said that. Oh, am I repeating myself? You know, I go into these little, like, judging, oh, I'm repeating myself. Did I go off point? You know, and I have that little internal dialogue going on almost 24/7. You know, I just filter it out now. And it's like, oh, did I listen to Tash properly? Am I speaking to, you know? So I'd love to know what your little observer perspective of this conversation was.
Well, the observer perspective is the beauty of actually being in the moment and allowing the moment to unfold. And there's something amazing that happens that opens that out, and it becomes, you know, quite an expansive situation where you're like, this could go anywhere. I mean, anything can happen right now. Do you know what I mean? If you said one thing, it can spin off into something completely different. Yes. You know, so there's that element. But the mind, there is an element of the mind, and it's kind of like that in the back somewhere, where it's like, so what's going to happen next? So, you know, what's going to happen? You know, where is this going? So where's the start and where's the finish? And, you know, and there's a part that wants to know, you know, so it's kind of like that. The rhythm of the both of those. But for me, it's always interesting to have that observer there, and I always try and keep the observer there as much as possible. That part that looks down on whatever it is that I'm doing, because that way you don't take yourself too seriously.
Exactly. Exactly. And also that, you know, we wouldn't be in the childlike, you know, again, I like the term, like, we're not childish, but we want to be in that childlike wonder, right? So what I love when people agree to go have these conversations is that, because we want to control everything, right? And that's what we're also breaking out of, because that control, which you described when you told me to go into the view of, you know, that view of like, this is how it is, and this is, you know, that is part of that whole control mechanism. So you know what, sometimes, Tash, sometimes people go and they're so determined, and I know it's semantics, and I'm probably I'm in my own control freak from it, but they're like, interview, could you do an interview with this guy? He's written a book, and I'd love you to do an interview with him. And I'm just like, I don't do interviews, I do conversations. And they're like, yeah, well, you know, and then they write back and they go, so the interview, can we set the interview up for a ring? And I'm just like, sometimes I've had like really, it's not an interview, you know, I'm not going to have questions for this person, just so you know. I'm not gonna ask them anything about their book, and actually I might not even want to speak to them. I don't want to read their book necessarily, and I don't actually necessarily want to speak to them unless they come to me, you know, in this very transparently open way, you know, like how I honored you in your patience, and the way that you just wanted to communicate to me, and then when I spoke to you, it's just like, yeah, well, I'd love to have another conversation and continue this. And I'm not thinking, you know, and I get caught up sometimes. Listen, I get caught up in this, Tash, with the bloody views and who's watching it, and it's such a powerful conversation and everybody needs to see it, and oh my God, you know, this guy's just started his over there and he's got millions of views and I should do marketing, but I don't really like marketing. I like sharing the way I do, and I go through this damn monkey mind around all these conversations. And then I speak to people that, you know, and I'm glad about this, but you know, that are not just my mind going, oh, I want to speak to him because, you know, he's well known. I go, wow, that's so the old mentality of what I grew up in, of trying to be famous. Yeah. You know, oh, I need to speak to this guy. It's like, well, that guy doesn't have necessarily any more to offer me or share with me just because he's written 50 books as the person that I bump into down the shop and have a most profound conversation with. Yeah. And so I think that's I'm digressing now slightly, but I'm not, because when you said about the universe, and you have the universal view, and we're dancing in between all of that all at once. It's like, that's what I'm dancing in between all of this at once as well. It's like I'm going through this in-between stories of seeing this new world birthing, wanting to live more transparent, more authentic, more in a space of love and freedom. And then within that, just feeling and being very aware of the old conditioned ways of being. That's it, really.
You know, it's really interesting when you were talking, because this is one of the things that I always bring people's attention to is the dantians, you know, the 3 dantians, or basically living from the heart, the head, and the gut, and really having a balance between those, because the universal is there, but I you know, I've met people who live up in the universal and they can't function because basically it's kind of like if you're sort of like so up in your divinity that you can't see that your bills need to be paid, and that, you know, you know, you ever someone say the nitty gritty of actually living on earth and all the bits of components that need to come together.
Right.
Ultimately, what tends to happen, you can do that and live in the Himalayas quite joyfully, right? Because the same rules don't apply, like the Western rules don't apply. But as soon as you want to live in a Western world with this kind of like just divine, up in the divine all the time with no break, then something, at some point, the foundations of the reality of life are going to pull you down. Do you know?
Right,
like,
right.
You need to look at what's going on here. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And there are times when people live so much in look what's going on here, which is what you're describing, where it's all about the figures, it's all about reality, you know.
Wars and crime.
You understand what I'm saying? It's kind of like there's no connection to the divinity or the universal at this point. It's kind of like all, you know, and that works to a degree, but that brings so much dissatisfaction, because there is always an element in the back of the mind of what next, and the next thing is never satisfying.
Right.
So you kind of get to the next thing and it's like, man, what an anticlimax that was. And it's like, well, what's the next thing? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you have to have the both. But then the heart in the middle is really, really important. And you can't just live from the heart, because if you're living from the heart, you dissipate your energy. It's kind of like you give, and there's like nothing else. And it's like, why is the world not changed in the way it's supposed to? There's no discernment and there's no grounding. So the marrying of these 3, where there's balance in between the 3, is always really important. And when you were talking just then about, you know, keeping it authentic, and so Simon on the Sofa being that kind of show where it's really about the meeting of 2 energetic beings, the meeting of 2 souls, and what can happen in the middle of that conversation, that is incredibly beautiful. And keeping the authenticity of that going is really, really beautiful, and I admire that. But always in the midst of that, you're going to have the you know, the actual grounding part of it, of like, well, how do we make this sustainable? How do we make this so kind of like I could keep doing this? Do you know what I mean? Exactly. And there's a universal part of it that informs that, whereas kind of it will show you how to make it sustainable, and it will show you how to open things up, and how to, so yeah, that was what was coming through.
No, nice. It's beautiful. It's lovely, and it's funny because that's exactly what happened in terms of just surrendering and just allowing what to come through. And and I was highlighting that just as the dance that goes on. It's like that. It's that dance of being in a world where even in the so-called wanting to help the world and so on, there's still this element of spiritual camaraderie and spiritual competition, and like check out my 7 days way of enlightenment, and and I've always tried to bypass that the best I can, navigate it without getting caught up, and I'm even out there doing wanting to do the work, and you can use that dance, because you can go and just be humble and not do anything, and don't tell anything about anybody or what you're doing.
Himalayas. You can live in the Himalayas if you want to. There's nothing wrong with that.
Go and hang out in the Himalayas and just just function up there. So there's that. I suppose there's just always that dance. But I feel, what's happening for you in the moment? How are you feeling? I'm feeling super charged.
Yeah, very, very charged actually, and very very appreciative of this time and this space with you, definitely. And the fact that this has come together and is unfolded and gone in so many meandering ways and come back and all of this, and I love the beauty of that, because I think what you're demonstrating with these Simon on the Sofa programs is definitely the human spirit, basically, and how we interact with each other on a spiritual level, on a human level, on a truthful level, on a transparent level. So yeah, I have to say thank you for inviting me to this. This has been amazing.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for connecting anyway, and saying come on the Art Life project. That was a lot. I know we didn't get video that day, but I'm sure we'll do another one, and that was lovely. So okay, well, yeah, I feel complete. What I'm really laughing at is that I don't know how to end this call. I wasn't joking. There's no end button, right? So I can't even press end. The whole damn computer is just freaked out. I think we took it up into the universal, and it's like it went something popped up on the side, and I'm so hoping we've even recorded this. It'd be so funny if at the end of this we didn't even get the recording, but it was so beautiful. Yeah, so I just want to acknowledge you in your work, acknowledge you also in continuation. I went over to your website obviously because I was grabbing some information about you, and I'm also enjoying your humbleness on how you just continue your project, and how when you first wrote to me, and again, people watching and went, oh, now we're just going to be loving to each other, but like this is really what communication's about for me. It's like really seeing the person and acknowledging them. And many people, I communicate with so many people, but it was our connection has continued purely because of how the foundation of how we communicate together. I remember the first message you sent me. It wasn't just like, hey, I want to be on your sofa. It's just like, hey, I've seen you. You sent me some stuff, told me a little bit about your book and what your vision was, and you wasn't even you didn't come with to get anything. And I think this is a really key that I want to share with everybody watching, is that communication for me is such a passion of mine. But it's like when we can just show up without this sense of what can I get, but actually what can I give? What can I bring to this? What can I bring to this conversation? What can I bring to this relationship, this community, this world? And be very humble in that, and check in with where people are before you even think, assume that you're going to have a conversation. I think there's something very just naturally, again, opening and expansive in that. So I feel that's how we've come together anyway in our dialogues and so on. So thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, basically, one of the things with doing the work that we do is there is still that dichotomy. So there's the dichotomy of actually being guided to open things up, and to be there as a catalyst for change and for transformation for other people, or whatever that form that takes. But there's also that element of, you see people doing things and you want to connect, and you want your work to connect with other people and all of that kind of stuff. And there's that questioning of how does that happen. And for me, like I say, it's very much following that that voice of, That person would be really good to connect with. Let's just see what happens if we just say hello, you know, see what can unfold in that. Or, you know, that person would be a really good person to have a conversation with. Let's just see what happens with that. You know, it's very much along those lines. And that's what's really led to us being here right now. And I'm grateful for that, definitely.
Tash, are you there?
I am, yeah. Thank you.
I lost you. It froze. But guess what? Can you hear me? Yeah, it froze, and then it froze, and then all the controls come back. So I'm just going to do this. I'm going to end it because it's saying I want to end it in this beautiful way. You know, you said it will come. Let it pop back up. Yeah. So I can end our call. But I want to say thank you so much for everybody watching. Please, below this video, there's a link to Tash's work. As you know, as always, you can check out some of the other conversations. It's December here in Malta. I'm just going to show you all the sun because I know some of you in England and America, you're watching that and so on. So I'm just going to show you out my window. We might get cut off. So if we do, I'm going to love you all, tell you to keep inquiring. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And please don't stop having these conversations. Don't stop expressing your truth and exploring what it means to be human. And remember, if you love this conversation, and we were just talking about sustaining and keeping these conversations going, well, get over to my Patreon page. And on the Patreon page, you can just click on there, watch a 3-minute video. I tell you what it's about. And if you're resonating, then, you know, support the continuation of these conversations. And yeah, it's going to be awesome as always. And here we go. I'm going to take that off and show you some goodness. Because, you know, like, I know everyone loves the sun. It's not about the sun, but man, it's blazing on me today.
Oh, man.
Yeah. You're in England. I'm just here, hanging out.
Fantastic. Wow.
That's like December. What are we on? December the 16th or something? 17th.
Yeah.
I love that.
Look at you squinting in the sun. There's no squinting on my side. Definitely not.
Yeah. I'm just like, yes. But I don't, you know, it's not to make people, it's just to say, like, you know, the sun is always shining. So even if you're in England right now, this is my towel. Look, you guys are seeing my towel as well. Look at that. Clean myself. Wherever you are in the world, the sun is always shining. Stay blessed. I love you all. Right. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye, Tash. And boy.